Okay, guys. Today I'm going to be talking to you about these fucking bullshit pound for pound rankings that were posted by ESPN MMA. And it's not just ESPN MMA. It's also, I think, MMA Fighting on SBN or whatever the hell they are. I saw the pound for pound rankings. We've got Islam at number 1. This is ESPN MMA. We got Islam number 1. John Jones number 2. Ilia Topuria number 3. Merab 4. Dricus 5. Magomed Ankalaev number 6. Bilal Muhammad number 7. And this is where the issues begin. Alex Pereira number 8. Pantoja number 9. And Tom Aspinall is number 10. So I've got some major issues with this. And actually, I could not resist the temptation to go and make a comment on this post because I am such a diehard fan of MMA and UFC. I just can't help myself. I have to comment on shit like this because it's bullshit. I commented, someone needs to explain how Bilal, with 0 title defenses, is higher ranked than Poatan and Pantoja. So I don't want to make this video trashing Bilal Muhammad. Bilal's done a great job in his division. He's cleared out, a lot of high-level talent. My issue is that why is Bilal Muhammad, who has 1 finish in the last 5 years, higher on the pound-for-pound list than guys who have not only won numerous times, but have actually finished fights convincingly, dominating their opponents? Bilal has dominated opponents by laying on top of them and getting some little ground and pound shots in. That is not a domination compared to being starched or put out cold. So I don't understand how Bilal, who has not defended his welterweight belt yet, and it's almost been a year, he is somehow higher on the list than 3 of the best fighters that the UFC's ever had. I mean, Pantoja being at that low after several title defenses, cleaning out the who's who of the flyweight division, which everyone wants to shit on flyweight and act like they're not good. When in reality, if you look at a flyweight fighting versus a middleweight fighting, the skill that the flyweights have is second to none compared to the heavier weight classes. But in addition to that, I'll just show you guys some of the responses here, right? You got someone saying, because he's beat better competition than Pereira. Pereira only beat Yuri and Jamal. So I don't understand that comment because it's like Bilal they've all beat the top of their divisions. To act like Yuri and Jamal are bad, I don't even know where that comes from. I mean, you got Jan Blachowicz, who was beat by Glover Teixeira, and Glover Teixeira then was beat by Yuri and Jamal. So to act like they're scrubs or some shit, I don't even know what type of comment that is, but okay. We'll just keep moving on. Because at the end of the day, Teixeira finishes Jan Blachowicz. Jan Blachowicz is one of the best light heavyweight fighters to ever be in the division. And I think you need to put more respect on that win and also put more respect on the talent that is in the light heavyweight division. It's not the most talent-rich division, but the top guys are no easy feat for anybody. I mean, you got Volkan Ozdemir was KO'd by Yuri, right? So Yuri is not a cakewalk. Now Pereira made it look like that, but he's no easy feat for other contenders in the light heavyweight division. We got Pantoja's division barely has any comp, and the comp it does have is for the most part. So I'm gonna just skip down because this is the narrative that fans are pushing. Bilal is this world beater, he just fucking lays on top of people like a wet blanket, and no one can do anything about it. Let's go and dive in to Bilal's record, okay? So what I did in this comment thread, I went back and forth with people. I'll highlight the one comment I made. And look, this is this channel is for me to put my opinion out there, right? So I'm showcasing some of my arguments, right? I want to make a video to talk about it some more. I don't want it to be a disrespectful campaign on Bilal. I have to say this, I am not a fan of Bilal's fighting style whatsoever. But I will say, after Bilal won the belt, he's actually gained a lot of my respect, and he's made me laugh quite a bit. I mean, the shit that he said about Kamaru when he was like, you're a bum, your fucking knees don't work, and your podcast sucks. That shit's hilarious. But I'm not a fan of his fighting style. So I'll tell you my argument here. Let's dig into Bilal's top 10 competition. He fights a 44-year-old Damian Maia in a snooze fest of a fight, wins, okay? So that's one of his top ranked, one of the people that were in the top rankings of the welterweight division at the time when Bilal beat him. Fights a 38-year-old Wonder Boy in another snooze fest of a fight. I mean, that fight, the entire fight was Wonder Boy trying to fight off the grappling of Bilal, which obviously Bilal is going to get the upper hand on. Wonder Boy has never had a good grappling regimen. He's gotten better over time, but at this time, I think it was 2021, he was nowhere near where he is now in terms of defending takedowns. I mean, when you saw Wonder Boy fight against Joaquin Buckley, he had great takedown defense, but he still ended up losing that fight. But just to give you perspective, Wonder Boy is one of the best fighters in the world, but when you put him against a pure grappler, it's not a good matchup for him. So right there, it's a snooze fest of a fight, and I would say it is a very favorable matchup to Bilal. So the only other fight that I could actually find, the only other two fights where Bilal fought a top guy, right, in the top 10 welterweight division is Sean Brady, which is honestly his best win to date in terms of Sean Brady on paper had the wrestling threat that would cancel out Bilal's wrestling threat. And so because of that, it is a true matchup where you could say skill for skill, who's better, right? Bilal goes out there and he fucking TKOs him, which never fucking happens. He still didn't get a knockdown though, because he never got knocked down, which is crazy. So with that, I give him so much credit for that because that was a young, hungry contender that was coming up in the division. Bilal goes out there and he makes light work of it, and respect to him for that. But he then beats Gilbert, and honestly, that fight, you can't take it away from Bilal. You know, they both took it on short notice, and I believe Bilal took that during Ramadan, so I got so much respect for that. He took it on short notice, and he didn't bitch, he didn't complain, he went out there and did it. So much respect for that. The difference is, though, you have to have an asterisk on that win. Gilbert got injured like in the opening sequences of the fight, I believe. It was like, it maybe not in the opening sequence, but it was in round 1 or 2 where Gilbert's shoulder gave out, or I think he tore his shoulder or something like that. And so it was a 5-round fight. And so Bilal just was able to kind of walk him down and pose his will. It was a great matchup because it was another matchup where Bilal could prove himself in terms of, his skills against Gilbert's. But with that, Gilbert gets injured, so it has a bit of an asterisk for me. Whatever. He goes on to win the welterweight belt against Leon in a fight that I actually will say, although I'm not a fan of Bilal's style, I thought it was an interesting fight, and I was engaged because Leon Edwards just seems to have this style that it's like, he has this pretty style, but it's like he just never fucking does anything. He just is like on his back foot the whole time. And I was just sitting there thinking like, okay, is Leon going to pull one out of the fire? Pull out the fire, Leon! I thought he was going to pull it out of the fire at the end, and ultimately he ends up getting, dropped on his head by Bilal. Bilal really proved himself in that fight, in that matchup, so I give him respect. It's a great win. Where I'm headed with this, though, is how is Bilal, even with these wins, right? How is he higher ranked than Pereira and Tom Aspinall and Pantoja? So I think you could make the argument, right, of, Pereira, because the whole fucking thing about pound for pound, which is so stupid, is like, well, if there were no weight classes, skill for skill, Bilal's better. Bullshit. Bilal acts like he's got this fucking outstanding boxing. Prove it, bro. You have one finish in the last 5 years. If your boxing is that great, why aren't you finishing people on the feet? You finished Sean Brady on the feet. That's the only person. Who else have you finished on the feet? Nobody. So don't act like your boxing is better than Tom Aspinall, who's literally knocked out. If you go look at Tom's wins, Tom has like 7 out of the top 10 beaten, and for the most part, it's by finish with his hands. But not only that, you want to then say, oh, well, Bilal's get the great ground game. His ground game is just, if they were no weight class, Bilal just smokes him. Bullshit. Tom Aspinall not only has knocked folks out on the feet, he has literally gotten submissions over some of the top 10. Alexander Volkov, Arlovsky. I don't think Arlovsky's in the top 10 anymore, but Tom Aspinall's submitted other fighters as well. He also, I think, submitted Tybura. So to sit here and act like Bilal, skill for skill, is better than Tom Aspinall is a fucking joke. It's an absolute joke, and it's horrendous that Tom is number 10 on the rankings. He is number 10 on this ranking. And then you have Pantoja, right? Pantoja, similar to Tom, has been a buzzsaw through the division. He has beat the who's who of flyweight. He's beaten everybody in flyweight that you can imagine, except for Demetrius Johnson. Like, the reason why Pantoja is like in a logjam right now, really, for contenders, is that before he became champ, he beat everybody. He beat Manel Kopp. He beat Kai Kara-France. He beat Moreno a few times. I mean, he's beaten the who's who of the flyweight division. And not just that, he's a true finisher. He goes out there to finish fights. Now, granted, there's been some times where, there's maybe a few asterisks, right? I feel like Steve Erceg, if Steve Erceg didn't make that mistake of shooting a takedown round 5, Steve Erceg's the new flyweight champ. Regardless of how you look at it, Pantoja has finishes not only on the feet, but also with submissions. He submitted Brandon Royval, who's like his best thing in the UFC is being a submission artist. So to sit here and act like Bilal, who wins unanimous decisions over lower level competition, because people want to say like, oh, the who's who. He's beat a few of the top 10, right? But he hasn't fought anybody that's the only person he fought where it was a unfavorable matchup or perhaps skill sets were canceled out was Sean Brady. Everybody else, Bilal had the upper hand off the rip because he's a grappler and they have no grappling defense. So that's one argument that I have to make. Bilal gets unanimous decisions over people. That doesn't make him skill for skill better than finishers who have finished fights in both categories of not only on the feet, but also finishing people on the ground. So right there is my debate for why you have to have Tom Aspinall higher. Now, the next point I'll make, you could argue that same point. Bilal, skill for skill, better than Pereira. Okay, I disagree. Because although Pereira might be lacking, people think Pereira lacks ground game, right? Because Israel took him down. Okay. I think that Pereira got taken down by Israel because Pereira, fighting Israel, who is a kickboxer, had no thought in his mind that that would happen, right? And so he gets taken down. But ultimately, what happened? What happened in the fight? Israel takes him down. Pereira ends up winning that fucking fight by TKO. So here's another example. Pereira is, manhandled in round 1 by Jan Blachowicz. Very close fight. You could argue Jan wins, but I think you have to remember the optics of that fight. Jan definitely, smokes Pereira round 1. He controlled the entire round. Round 2 and 3 were very close, and I think it was the optics of Jan and his exhaustion being in Salt Lake City. If you go back and watch that fight, and I just remember specifically Jan at the end of the fight, I think he was like sitting on the ground or he had his hands over his head, like he looked extremely exhausted. And those optics, I hate to say it, the optics can lose you fights in UFC, especially when you have these judges who are fucking idiots. They see you look tired and they're like, oh, you're tired, you lose. So regardless, Pereira's taken down. Now Pereira does not have an offensive grappling game, really. Obviously, if you look at the last fight he had with, Ankalaev, he threw him to the ground, but whatever. He doesn't have an offensive grappling game. But I think you do have to look at the fact that Pereira has been matched up with people who have great grappling. Jan Blachowicz is a black belt in jiu-jitsu. Pereira has not been choked out or finished in the UFC by submission. So, if anything, it's a testament that although he's not going in his bag to use the grappling that often, he is a great defensive grappler. He stops these guys from taking him down. He just stuffed 11 takedowns from Ankalaev. So to sit there and be like, oh, well, Bilal skill for skill. I mean, if they go against each other, Bilal he beats Pereira. He takes him to the ground and just lays on top of him because that's all Bilal does. I don't know that is the case. I mean, Pereira has stuffed takedowns from, the best grapplers in his division and been able to find a way out of it. Now, regardless, I get it. Bilal, if you're looking pound for pound, Bilal's grappling definitely cancels out Pereira's grappling. Now let's look at striking. Are you going to really argue Bilal even stands a fucking chance against Pereira in the striking game? Like, are we really going to sit here and try to debate that? It's like absolutely insane to me that we would even have an argument, because Pereira literally goes out there with the best strikers in his division, except for Ankalaev, I'll say, and he smokes them. He literally starches people out cold. He has his whole career. This guy is a once-in-a-generation talent as well. I mean, to be able to watch Pereira do what he's done in the short period of time he's been in the UFC, it's historic, and we should all really be happy that we're able to witness this greatness happen. Now, what I will say is Pereira being so much lower than Bilal, even though Pereira's finished almost all of his fights in the UFC, he has like maybe one or two decisions. He's finished the who's who of light heavyweight, and meanwhile, Bilal has decision wins over the top talent of his division. I don't know what type of fans are out there, but I'm going to just say this. I rate a finish, whether it be on the feet or on the ground, I rate a finish much higher than I rate a unanimous decision win, especially one that is done in the way that Bilal wins fights. It's like I lay on top of you, I throw some pop shots at you on the ground, and I win the fight. He's a great fighter, but he is not pound for pound better than a Pantoja. He is not pound for pound better than a Pereira. And he is not pound for pound better than Tom Aspinall. I think if you had no weight classes, to be honest with you guys, based on just previous fights and knowing that Tom is fighting at the heavyweight division, right? So let's just say if everybody was a heavyweight, okay? And they're all like, I don't know, size-wise, I mean, Tom is a big guy. So I think Tom should always be a little bit bigger, right? Tom is going to beat most of these guys. Like, there's no one that's going to just take Tom out. But meanwhile, Tom's number 10 in the rankings. I don't know where these rankings are built from, but I will say this. One other point I made in my comments is that Bilal has not only been starched out cold, he got that win back against Luque, but he was starched out cold by Luque. And not that long ago, he was also unanimously beat by Jeff Neal, who's number 10 in the welterweight division. Jeff Neal beat the brakes off Bilal. Bilal had no fucking answers for Jeff Neal striking. So I don't want to hear how Bilal, who's been knocked out cold and has really not had that many, he's had convincing wins, but they're not impressive. It's just like, you expect someone who's great at grappling to kind of be able to manhandle a striker, right? Like, it's just, there's skill there, right, to be able to do it. But the fact that he doesn't finish fights, in my opinion, should make him lower. Now, I do think Bilal deserves a right in the top of the pound for pound rankings just based off his resume and what he's been able to do. I just don't like that he is this high on the rankings, especially ahead of those who have finished fights in both fashions, whether it be knocking him out on the feet or submitting him on the ground. I think if Bilal had a few more submissions or finishes on his record, we could have a different story here. I did make a comment that if you've been knocked out cold, like, technically you should automatically be lower than some of the others on the rankings list. Now, I do think that this comment's not perfect because at the same time, I believe Islam deserves to be number one right now. The things that Islam's been able to do, and he has Islam's had boring wins in the past, but the way that he was able to come back in the second fight against Volk, knock Volk out, great win. The way he was able to go out there and finish Charles Oliveira, who was the boogeyman of the lightweight division at that time. The way that Islam was able to finish Dustin Poirier in a great, back and forth fight, and he wasn't relying on the wrestling. That's what I respect about Islam. It's like he could go out there and do what he did to Volk the first fight, where he laid on in round 4 and held on to him. Instead, he goes out there and he puts it on Dustin Poirier. He receives some shots himself, but he ends up winning that fight by submission. So Islam is one of the caveats, I'll say. He has been knocked out cold in his career, but the fact that he was able to overcome that and have the win streak he's on and also be a dynamic finisher, whether it's on the feet or on the ground. He even finished Moicano too, which I know it was a short notice by a day. Like he had like one day to find out. But for him to go out there and face a jiu-jitsu ace like Renato Moicano and then also choke him out in the first round, it is very, very convincing. And I feel like Islam has earned that number 1 spot. Bilal, on the other hand, he hasn't done these things. He's won by decision. And to me, there should not be so much weight given to that when you have finishers who are somehow falling below you on this list, but also finishers who've defended their belts several times. I mean, Tom defended an interim belt before Bilal defended his welterweight belt. So that is really my story there, is that I just think that these pound for pound rankings, there needs to be a new system in place, and you cannot have guys like Bilal being higher on the list of dynamic finishers, whether it be on the feet or on the ground. And I guess you could argue Bilal maybe, him and Pereira could be neck and neck, right? Because Pereira hasn't really finished fights. I don't think he has any finishes by submission, but he finishes the fights by knocking people out. And so that has to have more weight in the pound for pound rankings. It truly does. So there needs to be a revamp of this whole system. My final note here, and I don't have the rankings handy, but it was like MMA Fighting SBN or perhaps it was Ariel Helwani. They got fucking this shit really irks me. They've got PFL fighters on the pound for pound rankings higher than UFC fighters. They've got like Patchy Mix higher than Sean O'Malley. I think Patchy Mix is a great fighter. I think there needs to be a blanket statement that if you're not in the UFC or haven't been, you're automatically like, you're debunked. You're lower on the list of pound for pound because you're not fighting the best guys. I don't even know who Patchy Mix has beaten in the PFL. Sean O'Malley's actually beaten top level talent. I mean, he beat Aljo, who was on track to beat the bantamweight defenses, right? The title defenses for bantamweight. So he beats Aljo. He beat Petr Yan. You could argue he didn't beat him. Very close fight. I did think at first watch of that fight, Sean lost. Rewatching the fight, I see where Sean got the nod, right? He got that knee off that fucking opened up Petr Yan. The damage was on the side of Sean O'Malley. There is no world where Patchy Mix should be higher than Sean O'Malley on a pound for pound list. Patchy Mix is not fighting the best talent. Point blank period. There's no debate. I don't care skill, because the way, if we're going to make it the whole skill for skill debate, skill for skill, Patchy Mix hasn't fought the most skilled fighters. So how can you compare skill for skill against Sean O'Malley, who has been in the UFC and has fought some of the best talent in the UFC? Now, yes, there's debates that you can make. Sean hasn't fought, a Corey Sandhagen but he fought Merab, right? And he lost that fight, but he's fought skill for skill the best fighters in the world. Patchy Mix is not in the UFC and, in my opinion, cannot get that nod above Sean in this regard. That's my spiel on the pound for pound rankings. If you like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe for more MMA content that I'll be posting. And also, comment below your thoughts on the pound for pound rankings and let me know if you agree with my opinion. Let me know if you don't agree with my opinion. I'd love to have some back and forth with you guys. Thanks, guys.